and welcome to the Big Apple School Podcast, the weekly English show where we speak about everything under the sun. The major goal of this show is to help you improve your English and, of course, learn something new. My name's Katerina, I'm your host, and today with me,
Barbara
and
Гэri.
Dear listeners, you know that we here at Big Apple School think that the sky's the limit, so we want to become even better, and we want our podcast to be, well, the best. But in order to do this, we need a little bit of your help. So could you please give us some feedback about our podcast? Subscribe to our pages on Apple, Yandex, Google, VK, or any other platform, and let us know what you think about our show. You can send us your views, you can send us comments, and even your ideas about next episodes. We don't think it'll take much time or effort, right? But it will help us a lot, right?
Right.
I think
I was right there, wasn't I?
I was nodding.
Right. Nodding doesn't work.
Yeah, when we start getting, those video podcasts, you'll see how much nodding was involved.
That's right. Nodding will come to life, yes.
So, Barbara, Гэri, how's everything? It's been 2 weeks.
Oh, maybe so. But have you noticed that I am sporting a special ribbon today?
Wow.
Yes.
I believe this is St. George or somebody?
Might be.
Yeah, it's a George ribbon.
I know that the orange symbolizes the blood, I think, and black the smoke.
I don't know about orange blood. That's kind of
sound
creepy.
Perfect.
But
yeah.
it
I might choose perhaps.
The fire. Okay,
I don't
fire
know.
and
Red?
smoke.
If that's true, we would have orange and black flags. And neither one of us, America or Russia, has orange flags. So I don't think so.
All
but
right.
who knows? I could be wrong. We better Google it right now to settle it. But anyway, some kind of George, it's a valiant kind of medal to get. And it certainly does represent something. And
Well, it represents something
It
here,
does.
right?
Sure it does.
yeah. I mean, the victory over Nazism, I mean, that was a huge achievement. Have you ever seen an interactive or an animated map of how Nazism started in a little tiny place and then grew bigger and bigger to the north of Africa and the west part of the Soviet Union? Yeah.
Okay.
So that's my thing right now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Гэri, what have you been up to?
Well, it's been, the weather has been good, right? Have you noticed?
Oh, yes. Yes. You know what's funny, though, is that it was nearly 30 degrees not long ago, and yet the heating is on.
Oh.
It was
Yes.
still on.
Including in this room, I might add.
The radiators were just,
to sweat the best output out of each of us.
My apartment is so warm that I keep it off all winter. Maybe I might put it on a little tiny bit, but I turn it off. It is hot.
I can't really turn it off.
Oh, I
I can't control
Good
the
if you can
radiator,
do
yeah.
it, yeah.
There's a knob there, and you
On
just
some,
turn it
yeah.
one way.
On some, yes. I have very old radiators, so you can't do anything. You just suffer,
Well, suffering's always good.
I should be, growing tomatoes above, they love the heat.
Yeah, there are a lot of things, certain kinds of mold,
So,
wonderful in heat.
I don't think I would like to grow mold.
Okay.
What?
I'm trying
Have
to
you
take
ever-
a positive viewpoint.
Have you ever lived in a house so moldy that the walls actually, you wake up one morning and go, oh, the walls are now green? It's true. It happens. I lived in Georgia.
Did it happen
And
to you?
yes, and you can't get rid of it.
Oh my
Was
God.
it
yes.
like one day and you woke up?
Well, yeah, sometimes I'm just walking through and go, okay, the walls are now green. Okay, let's clean them. And then the next day, green again. Oh, horrible. Mold is horrible.
Aw.
Yeah.
So the mole was trying to kick you out of the house.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had to throw so many clothes away
Aw.
throughout the
dear.
years. Yeah.
No, I don't think that happens a lot in here in Russia. Well, in Novosibirsk, I think that's because we have dry air.
Winters is
Yeah.
very arid. Yeah.
It's like it's not really humid. Yeah.
Right. Humidity is not a big problem.
But when you say 30 degrees, you are talking about Celsius? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not good at Fahrenheit. I know that 90 is really hot. 100 is unbelievably hot. So it reminds me of my several days in Arkansas. And I'm like, okay, don't want that. And then 0 is really cold. And then minus 40 is the same in Celsius.
It's the same.
And in
I don't know
Fahrenheit.
how that happens, but
That
it's the
concludes my knowledge about Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we got into that.
Oh,
At
I
least-
tell all my students, because if they miss saying the C, if they say 40, and then they might miss the little tiny degrees, and then they'll just skip over the C. Oh, no, don't skip over that capital C. That means this. And then I have to tell about Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And then I make them Google. Now you must convert.
Oh, yeah. It's like, an average, and I still think that, they say that an average immigrant spends a third of their life sleeping, a third of their life working, and I'm pretty sure the third of their life is spent converting the Celsius into Fahrenheit, feet into meters.
Yes, very important.
Ounces. I mean,
Ounces.
who on earth invented ounces?
I don't know why
Yeah.
why we're outdated. But what about pounds? LBS? What's that?
That was my question when I first
Yeah.
went to a supermarket.
Yeah.
But then there is a pound, as a measure of weight, and then there's pound as the currency.
Right.
And then you would think, okay, I am counting that as like roughly half a kilo. I know that's not right, and then I remember being asked by a British person, like, how many stones is it? I'm like, hey, what now?
Stones.
Like,
yeah,
what?
Stones. Now,
Why?
speaking of the Middle Ages, which we haven't yet, but
Yeah,
stones.
speaking
Let's
of,
measure things in stones. How many stones is it? Or how many stone, right? How many stone? 3 stone.
Pebbles.
It weighs
so
3 stone.
do you know much about
I know
measurement in the
nothing.
Middle Ages?
Well, no.
Oh,
I'm-
yes.
just-
That brings back memories. Yeah.
Of the Middle Ages?
Yes. Like, for
My
instance,
childhood.
Yes, I was very young.
Some people say, as a rule of thumb, and a rule. Do you know what rule of thumb means?
Yeah, like the best rule or like the best way to do
No,
it.
it
like,
means that you're not supposed to hit your wife with something bigger than your thumb. That's what that's the meaning of that. Yeah, because women were
Barbara.
property back then.
Wow, Barbara.
And
Is that even a fact?
a metal nail is technically,
That's startling. Is that
really,
even
well, I
a
guess
fact?
yes,
No, I
it's
mean-
startling. That's what patriarchy does to us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Distorts
Yes.
identities.
Just send me back to the Middle Ages immediately.
so they had a rule like if it's
Yes, before-
smaller than a thumb, then it's okay.
So the rule of thumb, right? Of course,
Is
because
that-
you don't want to damage your property, right?
Oh, wow.
well, no, you don't, but
I mean, just as a general rule, no, you don't.
that's a good start to the topic, actually. Yes.
Okay,
So, dear
well.
listeners, as you might have guessed already, we're talking about No, we're not talking about property. We're going to talk about the Middle Ages. So, what else do you know about the Middle Ages in general? Like, do you know much about it? Not much.
Well, there were some things that I wanted to make sure that I remembered when I took my course during my undergraduate years. I had a really fantastic professor, and the one thing I wanted to remember was buttress.
The what?
Buttress.
Buttress.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I wanted to remember.
All right.
And this is this kind of long kind of support that facilitated higher roofs and thinner walls. So it's this architecture is what I'm talking
The
about.
flying buttress.
Right. So this thing that kind of sticks out is the way that they were able to put this arch higher and higher and higher. And it was all because of the buttress. And so I did remember that part.
All right.
Yes,
Well,
it lent way for stained glass windows for cathedrals,
I think
churches.
my first association would be Gothic architecture, which actually started in the Middle Ages. Yeah.
Well, actually, it is called Goth, but it was sort of like the detractors called it Goth because it was a pull away from Romanesque architecture, which was in the beginning. And the esque means it's not really Roman, but kind of an adaptation. So they're moving away from this Romanesque architecture into this horrible thing that some people just thought kind of associated with the ones who are the marauders, the barbarians, the Goths and the Vandals who penetrated the borders of the Roman Empire and led to the downfall.
Ooh, I did not know that it had such a history.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's 1,000 years long, right? So there's got to be something that
Well,
happened.
just,
Good point, actually. So,
yeah, so-
let's set the time frame for the Middle Ages.
Well, I'll just follow up on that. It goes from the fall of the Roman Empire, which is in the 5th century, early 5th century, to kind of a flexible time, but maybe the 14th century anyway, through the 14th century, and so on one side you've got the classical world, you've got the Roman world, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the other side you've got what's called the Renaissance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it was the Renaissance people who looked at what they'd just come out of or were coming out of, and they said that's Gothic.
Mm-hmm.
Which it wasn't Gothic at all. It didn't have anything to do with the Goths. It was like a slander. It just meant that to them that was like darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was, belonged to the world that they're looking forward to leaving, right? And creating a new world based on rediscovering the ancients and such as that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it goes between the time when the ancient world kind of fell apart and the time that the ancient world was sort of rediscovered.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Okay, so from there, we were able to go back to this wonderful knowledge that the ancient world had put forth, and that was because of the Muslims, these Islamic scholars who protected this knowledge. Of course, with the Muslim invasions, and they got this knowledge. They didn't burn these things from the Roman Empire. So luckily, after the Roman Empire did collapse, then we could have this great emergence with the Renaissance, because gladly this knowledge was saved, and we could go from there. But it wasn't like my professor in this certain course. He wanted to make sure he told us that it wasn't 1,000 years of darkness, because there was so much that happened. And we call it the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, as though it's like some kind of transition or some kind of interlude between something great and another something great. But I'm sure you got your notes saying that we're going to go into all the greatness of this period.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, that's interesting that on the one hand, a lot of people say that, this time was so dark, which is in some way a misconception. And then a lot of people kind of, romanticize the Middle Ages. They say, if I could travel in time, I would totally go into the Middle Ages. I think I would love it. So why do you think a lot of people have this idea of the Middle Ages as something great and romantic?
Well, part of it is that the people that were immediately coming out of the Middle Ages, like we were just saying, they did not romanticize it. Right? Because they knew what it was, for one thing, and they wanted more light than that, and more freedom than that, and breaking out of some of the shell that was involved in the medieval world. So they were not nostalgic. They were not romanticizing. It took centuries until all of that progress reached a point where it was like too much, which was maybe the 20th century, if not before. And certainly by the 20th century, and the people that we think of as really popularizing it, right? Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, right? They were already nostalgic. They were scholars, and they were looking back at it, because the 20th century, I don't use the word that starts with S. I try not to use that, but it was 20th century was pretty rough.
Okay, so we've lived through many dark eras, and within this darkness emerges poetry and art. And so wasn't that the time of the troubadours, right? With this romantic poetry, and maybe that's where the romance came from, this kind of gallant.
You could find it there, yeah, or it was there. Yeah, and maybe that was even part of that sort of toward the Renaissance, right? Because
I think the reason for romanticizing might be different depending on the time. Because let's say I read that in the 19th century, there was the whole wave of medievalism. So people they were inspired by the medieval times, and that was mostly due to the Industrial Revolution. So they thought, oh, we don't want this, because, everything new is usually, confronted by a lot of people. So, and they said, we want to go back to the agricultural way, the nature, the calmness. So medieval times were perfect in this way. So for the 19th century people, that was the Industrial Revolution. But I also thought about now, why now there are so many people who think, oh, that must have been, an amazing time. And I think that might be because of all the popular culture. Like we have a lot of TV shows that portray it, as...
They're not showing the diseases and the plagues and all the lice.
They show the knights, the honor and all the princesses. And
they don't show people... drowning in the rivers with their heavy dresses, trying to wash clothing. Yeah,
because
they don't show...
their husband was not keeping the rule of thumb.
Right, exactly.
And so forth. Those patriarchal bad people.
So exactly, they do not show any of that. So, and that creates some kind of a picture that was...
Right. And now
never a reality.
There seems to be a rule of thumb where we tend to... I think every 20 years we fall into nostalgia for 20 years ago. So now is 2020, 21. So we're talking about 2010. Are we nostalgic for 2010?
Well,
no.
that would be 10
a lot of people
ago.
are nostalgic about the 90s.
The 90s. Okay, maybe
the 90s,
like maybe 30s
Somebody
or 40 years. Yeah.
Somebody might be nostalgic for the 90s.
Yeah.
I don't. Right.
Yeah, I'm stuck in the 90s, but I'm not nostalgic for it. I'm actually stuck in the 80s, I think.
I think I'm
then
stuck
I forgot about...
I don't even want to say
what decade are you stuck in?
I'm
no,
stuck in.
I'm stuck in the 80s, and
stuck,
after that, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, well, it's too painful to think back. Anyway,
we should really be nostalgic now. The medieval times. What luxury.
The play.
Yes. The darkness. The wonderful darkness. Yes.
So, yeah, and I've, even recently there was this popular TV show, which is Game of Thrones, which showed, beautiful castles and, it did show the war, the wars between people, between everyone, it seemed. But
that was probably romanticized also, right? It was heroic. Was it heroic or no? I didn't watch it.
No, it was not really heroic. But still, people thought, oh, look at this castle, look at all the feasts they had.
And those castles were very cold, right? They were very cold.
Yeah, cold castles.
Right, and we also do not think about that. Yeah.
They were bad. Have you ever tried to be in a place that's heated by a fireplace?
Yeah, you don't get very
cold.
warm, right?
It's really,
and the
really
soot
inefficient.
too. I mean, it has to have really good ventilation, or else.
And also,
Which
not
they didn't
only
have.
a fireplace, but it was also made of stone, and it was marble in there, and it's impossible to
bad.
I mean, I remember. When was it? Like a couple of years ago, I used to have different meetings, like tutoring in the living room of my dorm, and the dorm was built 100 years ago, something like that. So it is only heated by a fireplace. And at some point they just said, it's open fire. You can't do that anymore. So it was impossible to be there, even in a winter jacket, wearing a winter jacket.
So that reminds me of, these cap and gowns that we graduate.
Yeah.
Well, the university system was started during this time. And of course, these cells that these monks and educated people lived in were very cold, and they wore these capes and gowns and caps, and that is why we today wear these from the Middle Ages.
I love that. I did not know that.
Yes.
I mean, that makes sense now that I think about it. Wow. That's cool. It's very topical, actually, because today and yesterday were the ceremonies of graduation ceremonies for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So in the US, at least, because I have several people who graduated, and I saw the pictures with these gowns.
Yes.
How do you call the...
We call these the caps on
Okay.
top.
Caps.
Okay.
Okay, so this was a time, sometime during these 1,000 years, that education used to be for the elite. But then, because people were agrarians, they were toiling in the soil. And then there was a time where this master apprenticeship evolved, where you could actually, if you were lucky, you can get under a master. And that's our master's degree, you know? Because when you have a master's degree, it means you're a master at something. Underneath that, you're just a lowly apprentice learning your craft. Yeah. And so I was inspired. I just remembered I was inspired by this time because when I was writing my thesis for my master's degree, I wanted to culminate all my passions. And I wanted it to really reflect this master, really being an expert on something.
What was the topic of your thesis?
Well, I wrote a historical novella, and it was called Ballet and the Bayonet. And it took place during the revolution in St. Petersburg.
Wow.
Yeah. So it had history and political science and ballet and creative writing. Yeah. So that was my master, because that's called the masterpiece. This is what it is. Once the apprentice can create the masterpiece, he or she is now a master. That's what I wanted. A masterpiece.
So what you're telling us is we are sitting now in the presence of,
yes,
of a master and the author of a
unpublished
master, unpublished, because so excellent.
Right. No one could dare read it.
Right. So good.
Yes.
Such a masterpiece that it must be hidden for future generations.
Exactly.
This is not an opportunity you get on a daily basis, Gary.
Right,
You should,
It's a very rare thing. I feel elevated.
as you should.
Strangely elevated. Or maybe just strange. I feel a little strange. Forget the elevation. No elevation. Right? Just I'm still on the same level, but just feel strange. I think it's the heat in this room.
No, it's not the
palms,
heat. It's
the underarms.
Right, yes.
Actually, Barbara, you brought this up, and I have realized that I know nothing about education in the Middle Ages. Like, were people literate? Could they read?
No, those agrarians could not. But when they expanded this system, then more people were pulled in. And I can't remember the details because, as I said, I was going to remember only a few things like buttress, but there are other things that I forgot.
Right. So sort of
specialized.
You really nailed the buttress. It was all worth it. All that hours of preparation. Buttress. It's about the buttresses. High ceiling, buttress.
Exactly.
It worked. Barbara, another masterpiece. A second masterpiece. A living masterpiece. Created before our very eyes. No, I think that, one of the things about the Middle Ages, because it's a long period, the university situation didn't develop until, 600 years into the thing. It didn't happen until about 1000, right? It started in northern Italy, and then in England in the 11th century, I think, right? Something like that. Anyway, but before that, there were just very few educated people. I mean, I listened to a Yale course, which you can do. It's quite accessible. I mean, in the sense that the level is. You can see why professors nowadays they have popularity survey things, where the students rate them. And this guy was very good. He was he was giving good information, but it was light and bright, it was informative. But anyway, he made the point, this talking about maybe the 7th century, 6th century, that there were just a couple of names that we know that were like the smartest people of their time. I mean, just to use the wrong word, but they were, that would, and, he made the comparison of like tennis players now, that you could, there's 1,000 ranked players, and if you're in the top 100, you're a tremendous tennis player, and it's just when you get to the top, it's the top, and but then it's like there's a short list of like 5, 6, 8 people that are sort of
That are known, yeah.
keeping the flame. And so that's kind of the dark part of the Dark Ages, is that they really did kind of lose literacy. They almost lost literacy in the course of this. Of course, they didn't entirely. And then it was the whole system that Barbara then described of the, the monks and so forth, keeping the written tradition alive, and probably even the ability to write and read alive.
Well, when you're concerned about survival, you're not going to be getting your education.
Yeah, and when
Fair enough. Yes.
yeah, society's fragmented and just the economy is broken down, and people were living in the Colosseum. The
They're living in ruins.
Yeah, they were living literally. People were living for shelter in the Roman Colosseum.
So yeah, that's definitely, education was not the main concern, definitely. Yeah,
everything had broken down. I mean, it's the kind of thing, dystopian, right? And it's kind of probably the basis for a lot of imaginings of what would happen if society, if the bad thing happened and society
like
broke
Wild
down.
Max, or what was that, Desert Max?
I didn't see that.
Oh, those were great movies. Wild Max, Mad Max.
Mad Max. Oh, the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the movies.
Oh, were there several?
I think
of
there
them?
were several. Yeah. But
I
was
don't keep up with
dystopian.
the movie
Yeah.
industry.
Well, I'm stuck in the 80s, as I was saying. If it was back in the 80s, I have some kind of recollection of Mad Max. Because you're talking about dystopia, and that was,
And that was the 80s dystopia.
what-
If you really went back there, you said, "Wow, man, I don't want to be."
Well,
here.
last time you said that 1981. Man, that was the year you said.
Okay, direct quote. Yeah. Well, okay. All right. It was a great year.
Yeah, that year is ingrained in my brain, 1981.
Yep, that was a year, wasn't it, Barbara?
Yeah.
Right.
1981. Okay, you don't want to talk about 1981.
No, we don't
But
wanna
I
talk
moved to Las Vegas in 1981.
But I do want to
Oh,
talk
wow.
about the Middle Ages.
Okay,
Okay. Nice way to return.
that was a good segue.
Nicely done. She's a master after so many of these. Right. It's just, you don't even feel it. Right. You're just gently
Smooth,
moved back
right.
into place. Yes.
I'm a master puppeteer. No, I'm not. But what about hygiene? Because, this is another
boy.
stereotype that people have. So we think of the Middle Ages, we think, everyone, was stinking, no hygiene. Absolutely no. So is that really so?
I think so.
I think that's actually not a
I
stereotype.
think you've
That's
finished
just
our
a-
conversation. I think there's
on
no
that
more to say on that.
Thank you for listening to a podcast. See you next
On
time.
that hygienic note, yes, on that, it's hitting a clean high note. But I think it's as bad as the stereotype and probably worse. And because I think even that's the other thing is, you think, the Middle Ages, but you take it even into, like the 18th century. It was pretty rough. The hygiene situation was rough. And so people were using perfume and they bathed once a week. I mean, you're talking about aristocrats. You're talking about people with money and everything in the world. But the nature of the thing was that you didn't do that because there were ideas about health. This is the 18th century now, right?
But that's interesting, though, because I was thinking exactly the same way. And then I started reading on the topic of hygiene in the Middle Ages, and it turned out that we're all wrong in a way.
Really?
Because even though, most of the villages and
tell.
towns...
Do tell. I'm some revisionist history here. Okay. That in
Are you
fact,
Yeah, as long as, if you don't have access to water, maybe they used hand sanitizers or something.
probably, Barbara.
Corral.
That's. I think that was invented in 1981, if I'm not mistaken. Another reason that year was so great. Purell was invented in a tiny laboratory in northern New Jersey.
So at that time, most of the villages and towns were made, and people were settling close to the water. So, and even though, there was no running water, in the houses, but still they had some access. And even though they didn't take, a bath or a shower because they didn't have any, every day or something, but it was still, necessary to wash every day. I mean, at least, the face or something. And then it was considered to be, well, not etiquette, but a need to wash hands before and after eating. Because at that time, there were no forks, no knives, nothing like that. So people would still, find some kind of a water source and wash their hands. And, baths were a luxury, but they still existed. And monks, for example, were allowed to take a bath 2 or 3 times a year. I know it's not much, but...
Right. All right. Well, let's
I'm really persuaded they really did have good hygiene.
People who were really well off, they could afford taking a bath, up to every week. Because, of course, they were not the ones who would carry that all. And, of course, it was not a bath that we imagine it now, with hot water. It was warm-ish water, but still.
I mean, well, they could make hot water if they wanted to make hot water. I mean, technically, right?
Well, technically, yes, but...
I mean, wood still burned back in those days. It's quite similar, much as it does now. Yeah.
Okay, so they had a huge problem with critters, rodents and insects like lice and...
That was the problem, yeah. And that's why it was considered a must, to wash in the morning, the face and... because fleas and lice were a common problem, yeah. So...
Oh, that was when the fine-toothed comb came into existence. Because you could comb your hair with a fine-toothed comb and capture some lice.
Which is kind of makes your day.
Yeah.
When you're living in the Middle Ages, man, I caught a couple of lice today. Wow, congratulations. Awesome. Right, yes.
I'm going to remember that for a week now. Right. What a day that was.
Yeah.
But apart from, washing their hands and washing their face, they also used different herbs, to mix with a straw that they slept on. Because otherwise, that was perfect for different kind of, fleas and vermin and whatnot. So they mixed it with chamomile, with basil, flowers, lavender, because that would, scare off some of the bugs. So they were at least, concerned about things.
Yeah.
And about not having...
Still wasn't very good hygiene.
Yeah, I thought
if we compare it with now, of course, but... I mean, if we compare it with the 18th century when people were just stinking, even when having, access to baths.
Yeah, the difference in the 18th century is people were living in cities. And you're talking about
mostly rural
town
areas,
people,
yes,
right?
of
Or
course.
small city, agrarian. Forget about towns even, towns.
But what's interesting, though, to hear all about that. But then if we think about ancient Rome, they had baths.
They did.
They had, the system
that's part of what they lost was that. Yeah, because it takes, you have to organize it, and you have to. I mean, they had a whole system of that. Sure.
I read an article about how these Roman baths were made and the system of public toilets, and I thought, what? They had public toilets at that time, so and it was an amazing system. Well, what happened to all that in the Middle Ages?
Well, those bad Goths came in, and Huns and Vandals and all those people, Alemanni and all those.
Well, not only that, but those Romans got very greedy about expanding territory, and they could not hold on to all that territory. So there are a lot of reasons why it ended. But yeah, we could definitely blame it on the Goths.
I mean, in the immediate sense, right? Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it was just, they were literally conquered. I mean, that's what happened to it was somebody stronger than they were came in, broke through the walls. Were they building? They didn't even build walls in a lot of places until probably late, if at all. I mean, it's a long story. Takes 2 volumes by Gibbon, Edward Gibbon. Takes a couple of volumes of amazing description to describe how the Roman Empire fell.
So that would be, episode on the medieval times, part 1. Yes. Then there's going to be part 2,
No.
just on the history of the Roman Empire.
I think we're probably going to shoot the wad on this one. Yes, sure, this will be it.
Yeah, you almost have to be an expert on it, right? To discuss it.
Oh, no. This is the internet. You don't have to be an expert on anything. All you have
Not
to do is
anymore.
know how to upload it. Right, yes. Right, yes. All you got to do is know how to push a button and up it goes.
Well, you have not won me over that they've had good hygiene back then.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear a revisionist.
I mean, so let's say the way I pictured it was,
Right, it's people with violet and lavender. Yes.
no, I mean,
They have to tote this water from the dirty stream into their house. And they have to have some kind of little tub, a little tiny little dish.
Little, very small.
but it
tub.
was still way
Yes.
better than later in the cities. Because if we think about, all the texts about, let's say, Paris or different European cities where people would just, throw
Yes.
a bucket full of things out of the window.
Right, and shout, Gardy-loo, right? Gardy-loo. That's what they
well, I'm not sure what
Oh,
They
is that what
did.
is it-
Gardy-loo. It means...
Okay.
I wasn't there,
Barbara's recalling.
This is a term they use to get the attention of passerbyers. So if you yell out, Gardy-loo, you look up and sidestep.
You better just run when you hear that. Yeah. Don't look up, just
Well,
move.
it depends on the speed of sound versus your position and the fall of the dropping liquid. I mean, it's
So, yeah,
a complicated
I
thing.
think, the Middle Ages compared to that were pretty hygienic, compared to
Okay, so,
things flowing.
Do you want to compare that to crane operators of 2021? Do you
crane
realize?
operators?
Yes. Do you realize that crane operators have their own bathroom up in the crane?
They what?
They
now?
do.
Well, they'd have to, wouldn't they?
Yeah. See, and that
never
is-
thought about that.
That's really civilization right there.
Well, I mean, 2020, come on. It's
Yeah. Come on, Barbara. Right? Yes.
different.
Right. Yeah. That's a different century. That's up in a crane.
Well, you were comparing it to other things. I thought it was fair to compare it to Russia 2021. I don't know what they do in the United States, but in Russia, they apparently have.
Well, yeah. In America, they have a pipe. They have an air conditioned pipe going all the way down. It's part of OSHA regulations. They have to have complete. It's regulated. They come in and inspect
Okay,
the
so
pipe.
next time
But
you
I
walk
mean-
by a crane operator, just look up.
But I mean, let's say the way that, technology and everything was advancing, the speed of that was different and the pace of that was different compared to now. Now, within 5 years, the technology can change in such a way that is unbelievable. That wouldn't have happened within 200 years before.
People won't
so
even need to use the bathroom. The crane operators of tomorrow will have learned self-control, self-mastery to a degree that they're good for 8 hours, and they come down from there, and it's no problem.
Well, it's all about being maintaining relevance, right?
I was going to say just that exact thing. You took the words out of my mouth.
okay, so, and what about health then?
Okay, we're talking about the lice. We're talking about the plague. We're talking about lots of horrible things that they made no connection between dirt and health.
So, and could they have any kind of a medical help with that? Well, maybe not with the lice because it was something that everybody had, but what if that was something more serious? And what kind of diseases were widespread anyway?
Well, the
kind
black plague, the blue plague, the red plague, the plague
All
plague.
the plagues. Right. All the colors of plagues. Yeah. Yes, you name a color.
And there's a
They
plague.
had it. There was a plague. One after the other.
Superstition. And they relied on like witch-like people. Have you ever seen that picture of like the crow?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what that was, a crow or something. And this man would come in and do a dance or do something.
Right.
And
I think I thought that they only, came and looked at the patient and said, well,
there was a
Good
time
luck.
they couldn't look at the patient because they're dying. Everyone's dying and the bodies are piling up. Yeah, it was horrible.
did you know that in
Horrible.
that beak they had some kind of, essential oil so that they wouldn't smell the rotting bodies?
Oh, I don't. Yeah, good luck
Oh,
with
wow.
that.
So it's back to the lavender bath.
Yeah, it was good back then. They had the lavender in the beaks.
Yeah, they just bring them in on wagons. lavender for the dust.
Doesn't Russia have a lavender meadow or something?
A what now?
A big lavender meadow in Russia. I've seen women posing.
Well, there's a lot of lavender, right?
I thought maybe it's just in Russia. Well, they could just tote it from Russia.
Might be. I mean, I don't think it's so widespread in Siberia, for example, but
there's some beautiful lavender flowers out there, field flowers, I can say, but whether they're actually lavender. They're probably lavender family.
Definitely.
Lavender is probably
if it's
a family.
purple or, that lavender color, then it's probably lavender or lilac, because anytime we can get...
We do have lilacs.
Yeah,
here.
lilac and lavender kind of get mixed up.
They're not from the same type of...
No, I mix them up. I have to re-Google it each time I want to just
Each time I want to know what I think, I have to re-Google it. Having forgotten everything in between. Beginning with a blank slate, I returned to Google to find out what it was I just looked up 3 days before.
Exactly. Okay. So when I was in the United States, I used to have walls filled with sticky notes, things that I wanted to remember.
Okay.
And
I thought you wanted to say lavender.
I was so amputated
buy
because
more
I
lavender.
live in someone else's apartment, and I'm very afraid of this person walking in and seeing sticky notes. So I don't do that anymore, although I do have some notes on my wall, and I will remove them if anyone comes in. I don't want them to see my sticky notes, things I want to remember.
How many sticky notes?
Well, I would have
How many
walls
diary
filled.
entries do you have?
Yes, I've already confessed that here before.
Like something
Let's get into Barbara's,
like what?
which follows, by the way, on her amazing use of the stylus. Lest we forget, it's the note-keeping version of the stylus. It's the permanent version of the stylus. Do you write on it with the stylus? Do you make your
crayons, markers, whatever works. Oh, markers in the bathroom are the greatest thing. You can get a marker and write on the tile in the bathroom, and you can easily take it off. But then I was afraid my daughter would think I was weird if she'd go to the bathroom and there'd be these things to remember on the walls.
Because nobody else will think that it's
But
weird.
nowadays-
Absolutely not.
Yeah, but nowadays you could just re-Google things. Okay, but anyway, I'll try to.
Okay, I have a question. How did we get to this from the plague and everything else?
Probably because we don't agree on hygiene. I think that's.
Oh, so you're just sabotaging everything else that comes after.
It's actually two
Like you
against
did not
one,
agree
I
with
think.
me, so
It's an anger thing. Barbara's
So what would-
working on her anger management. It's not all there yet. It's a progress. It's a work in progress. Yes.
but later on it'll become a masterpiece.
Yes. That'll be the final masterpiece.
And I hope you know me by then.
So, but what about this medical care? So, and what about the
Boy,
plague?
I sure wouldn't. Would you want to get sick in
I wouldn't even like to be in the middle,
1150?
like in the Middle Ages. Like I
Okay.
would die the very same day.
Well, that's what gave way to the age of discovery. They were trying to.
discover things?
They were trying to discover
Right?
things, but they were trying to flee this plague-ridden old Europe and all the patriarchy. But unfortunately, on those boats,
especially the patriarchy.
but on
that
those
was the worst
boats,
part, that
they
rule.
brought the ideology of patriarchy. And that, my friends, is why America is a patriarchal society.
Oh boy! Wow. Okay.
That's why we've had to have 4 waves of women's movement.
And we still haven't got. Still.
Wait till we have.
I'm not even gonna.
Well, wait till we have an episode on feminism.
Okay,
Oh,
put me
boy.
on.
Yeah.
Gary definitely showed like not me, just please.
Right. Yeah. I'll disconnect my email. Yes. Right. Yes.
So you prove my point, Gary.
my
You
internet
prove
account.
my point. Right.
Okay. Point carried. Yeah. Right. That's right. Touche, Barbara. You really made your point. All right.
All right. Well, it's interesting because I was some time ago. I mean, when I was at when I was at university, we had a semester of history, so it was mandatory, of Russian history. And I remember that we were told that there was some kind of, not medical care as we can picture it now, but there were a lot of people who would treat people with different herbs, with, well, I do not know, like flowers, dried flowers. They would make different things out of vegetable roots and something like that. Sure. So I was wondering whether that was also the case in Europe, for example.
Yes, they had books written about that. Mm-hmm. And you'd have some kind of swelling on your inside elbow, and you would,
for example,
you would need this type of plant.
Yes, you'd look up.
And then if it's on the outside of of your elbow, you'd look in another next page. Yes.
Sounds logical to me.
because everybody knows the inside of the elbow is very different. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to think of a neutral place that we agree on.
Well, thank you for doing that. Was very well chosen.
What about dental care? I mean, what if the teeth hurt? Did they just
no,
they
didn't have sugar. They didn't have sugar.
So you think they had perfectly
everybody
they had
teeth with no cavities?
Right.
Right.
Another revisionist moment.
Wait a second.
Everybody's walking around just with perfect, beautiful teeth. Fighting dragons, and they just, they open theran mouth. It's just gorgeous.
And you just go blind from the brightness.
Right.
Like, no, stop.
And the dragon just ran. That's why you don't find dragons, because the teeth were so good.
Wait, what do you mean there was no sugar? We had an episode of sugar.
We did, but it didn't. These are the poor people. These are people who did not have things. They didn't have good
care.
They didn't have sugar. That was in London in the Industrial Revolution. Okay,
you need to re-listen to that episode.
I know. I remember I was into another era, and you set me straight about earlier. So now this is the earlier of it. And
back to Google. Wikipedia page. Yes.
Okay, Google.
Right.
Tell us.
Okay, tell us about the teeth, because
I'm saying they didn't have sugar, but you might know something else.
They did actually have some. Well, the elite did have some kind of dental care. They were given again the herbs, and sometimes they would even, oh God, I don't know the name for this machine, that makes holes in teeth now, but they had some kind of a prototype of that. And actually, I was shocked to when I was at a museum in London, I was shocked to see that dental care existed actually starting with like ancient Egypt times. So they would basically tie the teeth together. They would make holes in teeth and tie them together so they don't fall out.
Well, they were very clever. The way they would get in there and tie those teeth.
Well, it's better than having no teeth at all.
Well, that's true.
But you know what? If you look up a different,
not to offend our ancient Egyptian listeners, right? By the way, yes.
Oh, be careful with those. They knew some dark stuff.
They're a testy group. Yeah. They're a testy lot.
I was going to say something, and I forgot.
We're sorry.
Look what we did again. How she can even manage to keep a thought train.
It's the Americans.
You can
we're just wild. Yeah, we're just wild. We're unruly. We're rebels. We always have a cause.
Little barbarians who were once taught how to behave, but
it didn't take.
Well, I'm not saying that.
Right. It's just you don't need to. It's just all over the place. Just open your ears.
Oh God! Wait, and what about religion then? So we've talked about health, hygiene. What about religion? What do we know about religion in the Middle Ages?
Well, religion, they had aplenty. It was a kind of a religious culture. To put it mildly, not kind of a religious culture. It was a religious culture. And so it was the Catholic Church formed, right, became an institution, became actually the institution that sort of kept culture together as the political institutions fell apart. the Christian element, the Catholic element specifically, which had allied itself with the Roman emperors, right? They continued as the Roman emperors fell. They converted the barbarians, these famous Goths and so forth, to Christianity, to a form of Christianity or different forms of Christianity, and sort of kind of Christianized the culture, sort of, in a sense. And so that the dominant way that people thought was religious in a Catholic way. Okay, so that was people's worldview.
Yeah,
right?
This is where the patriarchy started, was with these male heads of the Catholic Church. And then, of course, the mayors and the governors of the towns were men.
They're all men.
And, yes. And then, of course, the head of the household was a man. And so this was very strong in their culture of this male domination.
All right.
I don't even have anything to add to that. I can just nod.
I don't know that I'm going to argue that. It's. I mean, it's. Yeah, I don't know that.
Well, also, and then, if you don't believe me, there is evidence of this.
It's like, you don't look convinced right now.
You don't look quite convinced. But in order to support this ideology, there would be clergymen who would write things, telling the world, their community, that women were not as smart as men, that they were fickle. And so when you have this down in paper and then disseminated, and this is the culture, then women were not protected by the law, hence domestic abuse.
Right, but that goes back farther than Middle Ages. I mean, I'm sure in classical literature, I suspect you could find the
you
same ideas.
You just said that the Roman Empire fell and the Catholic Church continued, which
That's true.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
And we're talking specifically about the Middle
something
Ages.
I said and true, yes. Right.
Yes.
Not everything, not in every case.
No, I'm just listening to you.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
so we're talking specifically.
If you want to learn a lot, that's what you need to do, Barbara.
Specifically about the Middle Ages, because that's what this podcast is all about. Nothing about anything else.
Right. Yes. In case, just to remind you in the middle of it, that really is what it really isn't about feminism.
I feel attacked right now.
Right, yes. That's a little bit of a side turn. Right.
No, I thought you were going to say crane operators.
Right, or crane operators, not to mention.
And what about the Inquisition?
Oh,
because this is closely connected with religion.
200 years of this, right?
So what can you tell us about this?
Well, the Inquisition was also a Catholic institution, shall we say. It was a way of punishing Catholic Church. As time went on, it felt its grip on the culture weakening. And there were historical factors going on, and it's hard to keep a monolith culture together for any length of time. And they were trying to do that. And of course, people were discovering, there was a mini Renaissance in the 12th century, and all of this, it wasn't so dark as we were saying. It started really dark, but there was a lot going on. There was a lot of change, and including some, I suppose, technology and knowledge, the universities, everything else. And so the Catholic Church was feeling its grip being threatened. And so it cracked down. And it just announced these Inquisition was one way of dealing with that. And these were like a court. Of course, you have Dostoevsky and the Grand Inquisitor, right? And which I haven't read, but I know it as a factoid, right? Which is pretty bad.
What was the point of the Inquisition?
It was to punish so-called heretics, and to purify. It was a threat. These people were it's hard to tell what they even believed because the Inquisition was so thorough in destroying them.
Very convincing they were.
Well, they were convincing by torturing and killing, and I mean, it was like no holds barred. We'd say just using every means possible to root out these elements, which were in the south of France initially, and then in other places. So it was this kind of a court and an investigation, and to just try to get people in line in their thinking, right?
I would like to describe how all of that went, because again, I had not known much about the Inquisition. I mean, I was one of those people who had a lot of misconceptions about that. But apparently, so when the Inquisition came to some kind of an area, so the local bishop assembled the people on some kind of a square. So, he would announce a grace period of up to a month for heretics to confess their guilt or to inform on others. So, and then during this period, so the Inquisition would collect all the accusations, and if 2 witnesses under oath named or accused one person of heresy, this person would, get summoned. I would not say arrested, but, and then there were 2 options. Either the person would confess or he would be tortured until he does. So sometimes though, the thing is that if you inform on somebody, but you lie, you would also be punished for that. So that's why if you are accused of something, but you think that, somebody did that on purpose, you might name the person. And if it's true, if you guess right, then you might be left to go. But of course, it would only depend on the, on the inquisitor. Well, where's the stress in this word?
Inquisitor. Second syllable.
So, yeah, but since, these people, were not very kind as a rule, so they would not really believe,
that qualifies as today's understatement. Yes, the inquisitors were not known for their kindness.
Definitely not, yeah. And then there were also situations when the inquisitors would torture people and they would confess, yes, we do not believe. So the next day they would be asked the same question. And of course they would deny everything because, they were not being tortured anymore. So then the torture would start again so that, only the confession, not under the torture would count. So, and the thing is that technically, the inquisitors were not allowed to torture a person multiple times. So that's why all of that was considered one torture that was just paused for some period of time. And only once in history, as far as I remember, there was a situation when the inquisitor was, I don't know how to say that actually, when the Pope, I think, or the bishop told him, you can't do that anymore because you're way too cruel. So because there was a person who killed way too many people, and that started to be suspicious that, are you really fighting for the belief, for the faith, or are you just enjoying, torturing?
Yeah,
so
the popes had initiated it, and depending on the pope, they could be sadistic like the inquisitors, right?
Well, it was known that the church was very corrupt, and the pope would probably reprimand this punisher or this torturer only because it benefited the pope or benefited. It probably wasn't because the pope decided to be so.
Either that it was so utterly extreme in some way that it, there's still some element of conscience there, even in those days in the popes, but it was generally unrestrained. I ran across a website on that was about. It ended up being about. It's a French website in English that was about the First Inquisition, the French Inquisition, which is in the south of France. And it's this entire. It's like a tourist thing. The group were called Cathars. Cathars, like we have the English word catharsis, which is a Greek word, I guess, but it means purging or cleaning, right? And it's just as live can be. And, there were just thousands of victims. And there's, these places in the south of France that you can go, I guess, as a tourist thing. And maybe, all of these people had descendants, right? They had, people that looked to that or groups that identify with that, which would include even my group, because my group would have been persecuted by the Catholic Church if it existed, and sometimes we identify even with those groups because we don't know really what they believed. They were, the Catholic Church totally destroyed their writings, because they were heretical, so you just burn it. And so what they actually believed is really hard to discern. But anyway, so it was bad, and it was, and it, there was the French, that was one part, and then of course the Spanish Inquisition, right, with Torquemada, and it just went on, and it was, terrible.
Yeah. A lot of people also, associate the Middle Ages with witch hunting. So do you know anything about that?
Interestingly, well, I do, in the sense that one of the accusations that I think may even have its sources, the original of it, the accusation of witchcraft was associated with the Inquisition. In other words, these are the enemies, they're totally evil. So if you want to make them absolutely the worst, you identify them as witches who were basically worshipers of Satan, right? And servants of Satan. And that was part, so that these groups that were persecuted, they were persecuted in Italy also, and they were, what they were basically, you would say, inaversi, right? Just people that didn't believe like you were supposed to. And, but if you're going to want to wipe a people out, then you have to just say the most outrageous thing about them, right? And so that they're witches and they're flying on their brooms to, do satanic, evil, immoral, vulgar, horrible things, and why not? And that's why we're destroying them. And then the different mentality develops around that, so.
But it's interesting that we associate it with the Middle Ages. However, it was not in the medieval time at all, because it started in the 17th century, which was not the medieval time already. So there's a bit of a misconception about the time frame.
Maybe that's true. It's
because in the Middle Ages, it was not that the witches should be persecuted or something. There was belief that they did not exist at all. So it was not that the church was teaching they're evil. They just did not believe in them. They do not exist. So why bother hunting someone who does not exist? So that was the situation at the time. And only later, at the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the middle of the 16th century and later, the witch craze began.
Yeah. The witch craze actually rose out of the conflict with Protestant. When it was already, which was later. So that was when that became part of the rhetoric against the other side. Was, well, they're just so evil. They're not just Protestants, but they're devil worshipers. They're not just Catholic, because it also went the other way. It was on both.
So what you're describing is just this same thing of just holding on to power, holding on to control.
Yeah, it was about power. Sure was.
Isn't that always about power? I don't want to end, on such a sad note. So let's talk about something more positive and more, I do not know, inspiring. So let's talk about art. So what do we know about art in the medieval times?
I don't know, just
the buttress.
That's all I know. That's all I know about that.
Well, that's.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, the Gothic cathedral, right? That's where the buttresses were. Is Notre Dame that burned recently, unfortunately.
Well, it did not burn. It did not burn down. It's just the roof that.
Oh, I think it.
Yeah, the gargoyles.
Yeah.
Oh, aren't those beautiful?
They are beautiful, or they were beautiful. I think it was really very destructive.
It was, because the gargoyles fell down.
That's how you measure.
Yeah, how bad it was.
Okay.
That's right, a really bad fire, the gargoyle. Where are the gargoyles? So do
any names come to your mind, of the Middle Ages, artists, sculptors, writers?
No, my mind is a complete blank.
Well, it was more of the cult, not the cult, but the tendency to make a lot out of individuals is kind of a modern thing, right? Like we would. Now there were individuals. There's people like Thomas Aquinas, a Catholic theologian, and there's a guy named Abelard, who was another theologian of the time. There were Dante, I think, is still medieval, and he's somewhere toward the Renaissance. It's kind of on the cusp there. But there was, because of the collective, the collective was very powerful. This who built Notre Dame? Well,
yeah, you wouldn't get one name. Yes,
the people built it.
Yes.
There were actually architects, and that if you were a student of that, then you might know that. And as somebody who read or listened to a book about it recently, I can't remember the person's name, anybody's name that was involved in that. So there were architects, but they weren't like Frank Гэri, where you got superstar architects and wow, man, how does he live? And, what does he think? And, all of this. I mean, it's just the cult of the individual hero. That's a modern thing. And, the other people were toiling within the church or toiling, as just part of their city's effort to build a great cathedral to God. And so, the individual wasn't so important. There was kind of a collective sense.
Yeah, I was trying to remember some names of the medieval times, and I realized that I can remember the names that belong to the end of the Middle Ages, the beginning of the Renaissance period, like Giotto di Bondone, or let's say Brunelleschi, who is considered to be, the founding father of Renaissance architecture. So, but he was living and working right at the edge, of these two periods. So I'm not sure whether to include him to the Renaissance times or to the medieval times. So it's
right. The real deep medieval people they would be within the church. There were some great popes in their own way, and
But I think we can say that even if we can't name people, most motives and the topics of art were still about religion.
They were.
Well, that's because they were under contract. I don't think it's because they cared about the religion at all. It was the church who paid them.
Oh.
Well, we do not know what their motives were.
I don't know. I think that the general that the culture then was sincerely. I mean, it's mixed with all kinds of fear and things that we don't love and that aren't necessarily beautiful, but in themselves. But that there was a lot of sincerity, especially over time, like in like maybe the 12th, 13th century, there were movements even within the Catholic Church that were toward more of a personal relationship with God, and people were yearning for that. I mean, really, and that's one of those forces toward coming out of the Middle Ages and toward more of what would be a Protestant view of things.
I disagree. I think they were there for the job, definitely.
Okay.
Whatever the reason, we see the result of
yeah.
Because they knew about the corruption, because all through the Middle Ages, it was known that the church was corrupted.
I'm not making any comments on that.
Okay, well, and
I do not know much on the topic to be commenting.
I think it's hard for us to imagine a culture as steeped in religion as that was, and the way of life and the holidays of it and the rhythm of life and the agrarian rhythm of life and just the whole. I think it was just part of their world, and it isn't for us. It's that all broke down long ago and in that form, and so. I'm sure that there was a lot of sincerity, a lot of formalism, and maybe the architects, the star architects were already it was just a contract to them, the star architects of the day, maybe it was. But probably for the people that were sitting there, carving those gargoyles, the famous gargoyles. Maybe they were doing that as something unto God. I don't know. They certainly did a beautiful job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were paid probably good money.
Oh, wow, Barbara. Okay. All right.
Would you like to live in the Middle Ages? If you had a choice to go back in time, would you?
No, I don't want to be property.
Gary?
I want to be a property owner. Yeah, right. Yes, I want to go back. Right. Yes. I want to have property under my thumb while I'm using a fine-tooth comb. If I had anything to run the comb through, it would be nice, but that's okay. It would be tough to go back. I mean, it would be tough to go back even 100 years.
Or even a year ago. I mean, that would be really hard.
Let's not remember a year ago. That did not happen.
Right. Yeah. For Barbara, today is
today's the day.
What is that? That Latin phrase, seize the day, carpe diem.
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem.
Yeah. Seize it. That's Barbara's. I say seize the ancient. seize the ancient spear and
I want to tell you what gave an idea for this episode, actually, for this podcast, because a month ago I had a birthday and I got a birthday gift, which was a board game called Medieval Suffering. So it's a whole board game based on the Middle Ages. So you have, the cards of the plague, the lepra, and the epidemic that goes from city to city. Then you have different, knights, maids.
Boy, this is the perfect 2020 gift. Right. Some guy sitting in
the
Chicago
pandemic.
Goes, I've got an idea for a game, and the guy goes, Maury, I think it'll sell. Right, put it out there.
Oh, and hell it will.
Rush it.
But you know what? Actually, this whole topic of the Middle Ages has become quite popular recently. There are so many memes, and there are podcasts. I think there are board games, books, and all of that come under the name of medieval suffering. So it has become a part of popular culture now. So I'm not sure they're popularizing it, but they show all the horrible things of the Middle Ages. And you know what? While we were talking, I've realized that in that board game, there's a card which says witch. But there were it was not connected with the Middle Ages. So
I think
there's a little bit of inaccuracy.
I think the witchcraft thing goes back to that. I think it goes back to that, to the Inquisition that I referenced there.
Well, if you're talking about pagans, I mean, pagans were before Christians, so...
and they were constantly, that element was always under.
Yeah, they had the gods and multi-gods.
So, and now I want to.
So was that to end on a positive note? Right, yes.
On a fun note, I had a board. It's a cool board game.
That was jolly. I'm glad we didn't end on whatever that other note was. That wasn't as cheerful, chipper as that one was.
Well, you shush.
Katya pulled it out of the fire on that one. Yes.
Again, I feel a little bit attacked, but fine. So if you could summarize this episode in one phrase then for our listeners, we need to advertise it,
Suffering.
Yes. Medieval suffering.
That's 2 words.
That's a copy. That's now, I said in one phrase.
Oh, one phrase.
It can be one sentence.
Okay. We'll hyphenate it so you won't be stepping on anyone's copyright.
Right. or make it 1F instead of 2. It would be the Middle Ages way of doing it. Irregular spelling.
So that would be yours, Barbara. How would you summarize this episode?
I can't remember a thing. I've been in a whirlwind.
Yes. How do you call the thing about the architecture? I forgot.
The buttress.
Buttress.
That would be your summary.
Buttress. Back to the buttress. Yes. Right. Yes. We've backed our way in.
Oh, there's a movie which is Back to the Future. We're going to have Back to the Buttress. That would be the name of the episode. I'm telling you. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for this interesting conversation and constantly attacking me, but fine. Okay, so that was the Big Apple School podcast, and today we discuss the Middle Ages and all the fantastic things of the time. Thank you for listening. And remember, if you struggle to understand our conversation, you're always welcome to our website, which is
www.bigapple.com/podcast with the period before Big Apple.
And it's also bigappleschool.com/podcast.
Google
and
would
you can
figure it out. Google is so smart.
We'll get there, you know. And you can find full scripts of each episode there, so you can read the script while listening to the podcast, so that's amazing. And if you want to get more content which will help you learn English, you can always follow us on the social media such as Instagram, VK, YouTube, Telegram. Just search our name, which is...
BigAppleSchool.com.
Not .com. It's the name of the school. You're not listening.
Okay.
So just search our name, which is Big Apple School. Okay. So that was Katja, and my guests for today were
Barbara
and
Gary.
Stay tuned, and we'll see you around.